What is up, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be discussing something that has been of great fascination to me recently, and that is psychobiology. Now, I reached out to my Instagrammers a while ago and just asked for video suggestions, and someone said, do a video on psychobiology. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I have a background in psychology, very fascinated in psychology of the mind. And psychobiology is the biological basis of behavior, 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 and mental conditions. This is going to be a one take. I don't care how it comes out. So, it's basically explaining why, say you're walking down the street and then you hear a loud noise, a car beeps its horn, or something happens, and all of a sudden, uh, your heart rate goes up, you're more alert, you're just more focused, more aware, you go into fight or flight responses. Psychobiology is basically explaining all the processes and mechanism that is involved in your biology affecting your psychology. And there is an interesting saying that everything psychological is biological. And if we really want to understand this on a deeper level, we will go to neurons. Now, neurons are the building blocks of your nervous system. There are billions of neurons in your brain, and they are identical to a regular cell. However, they have an electrical component to them that allows them to receive and send information. Now, there are three main components to a neuron. That is the cell body, also known as the soma. This is the nucleus of the cell. This is where the mitochondria and the DNA lives. And if this cell body dies, the whole cell dies. There is also the dendrite, which is the tree-like structure to the of the cell, and it kind of looks a bit like my hair. Kind of look, if my head was the cell, my hair would be like the dendrite, and this is what receives the information and relays it to the soma. And there's also the axon, which is a long cable-like structure that is the talker. It sends information to other neurons. And the point of contact between two neurons is known as the synapse. And the synaptic gap is that little space in between, a very tiny space in between, where the neurotransmitter jumps across the gap to the other neuron, and it gets reabsorbed. So the way neurotransmitters work, they send across from the axon to another neuron, and then they get reuptake. And this is how neurotransmitters are sent across. And neurotransmitters are the electrical signals that neurons use to communicate with each other. And this is why you feel, this is why you move, this is why you get in certain moods, etc. Is because of sensory input. From sensory input, messages are sent along the neurons, and they activate certain neurotransmitters that send across neurons and cause you to feel a certain way. And an example of this is dopamine. Now, dopamine is known as an excitatory neurotransmitter, and an excitatory neurotransmitter revs up the neuron. It really revs it up, and dopamine is related to reward and learning. And what's interesting about dopamine is that it is, a lot of the time, dopamine is connected with things that are related to your survival and reproduction. Now, this is why, say, eating feels really good. You know, you go home, you expect dinner, and, you know, your brain is already kind of like releasing a bit of dopamine in expectation of dinner. And as soon as you eat the dinner, dopamine floods through your brain. You're like, yes. It's like, yeah, I feel good. And the reason dopamine is released whenever we say eat is because if eating wasn't pleasurable, why the fuck would you do it? If eating wasn't pleasurable, why the hell would you do it? And there are other things that release dopamine, like physical contact, like intimacy and having sex, releases dopamine. And basically, anything movement releases dopamine, because if you didn't feel good whenever you moved, then why the hell would you even want to move? This is why endorphins also comes into play, and this is another excitatory neurotransmitter. And endorphins make us feel good. They are responsible for the control of the feeling of pain. They are known as like an opioid, like they attach to your opioid receptors, and this is what's in relation to like sort of like the management of pain. And endorphins are released whenever you're doing like intense physical activity, or there's also studies have actually shown that endorphins are actually also released whenever you meditate and whenever you laugh. So this is one of the main reasons why, like, say you're laughing and you're like, why does laughter feel so good? It's like, why do I feel good when I laugh? It's because endorphins are being released as you laugh. And the interesting thing is, whenever you're, say, having sex, uh, there are three main chemicals and neurotransmitters that are being released, and this is why like sex feels so good. Is because whenever you're engaging in sex, you're not only releasing dopamine, but you're also releasing endorphins. And the one I haven't mentioned is you're also releasing oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is different from a neurotransmitter because it is a hormone that is released by the pituitary gland. Now, we have an endocrine system which is different from the nervous system, but they act very similar in the fact that it's a process that happens based on sensory input and causes an alteration to your behavior. The endocrine system, in response to like touch, like whenever you hold someone, kiss, hug, or actually, make love, your pituitary gland releases this hormone called oxytocin, and whenever that goes into the bloodstream, it causes us to feel a sense of bonding, of closeness. This has been studied in the science community. It's known as like the love hormone and stuff like that. And this is actually why I think in the Harlow's monkey study, why the monkeys like chose to go to the cloth mother 18 hours of the day, or the majority of the day, and only went to the wire mother whenever it was hungry. But if you haven't heard of that study, it's like, if you check out my channel, there's a video on it. But I think it's because it releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is known to inhibit stress response. So whenever you're stressed, you're like, what? Laugh. You just something horrible has happened, and so you're like maybe in tears, and someone gives you a hug, and in that moment you're just like, yeah, I feel better. There's a bunch of things happening there, but oxytocin is being released, and that inhibits stress response. So the last one I want to cover in terms of psychobiology, and just kind of just talking a bit about it. There's so much you can talk in relation to psychobiology. The last neurotransmitter I want to talk about is serotonin. Serotonin, and this is actually known as an inhibitory neurotransmitter. And inhibitory neurotransmitter, they chill out the neuron, they chill it out. And serotonin is related to things like your mood, your appetite, your sexual desire. And what's actually interesting about serotonin is that 90% of serotonin is produced in your gut. 90% of serotonin is produced in your gut. And I just came back from the vegan festival where I heard Mike the Vegan talking about this, and he showed a paper, he showed a study. Like a whole food plant based diet has beneficial effects on your gut biome. And whenever I was doing the research on this, it said that your your um, your gut bacteria uh, better produces serotonin whenever you eat whole foods, like whole fibrous foods. So I thought that was very interesting. And another thing that's interesting about serotonin is that low serotonin levels have been linked to depression. Now, it hasn't been really clear based on what I've been researching whether depression causes low serotonin levels or low serotonin levels causes depression, but I just thought that's an interesting information to have in your back pocket as you're sort of moving through the world. And there are ways to naturally stimulate serotonin, and we can do things like go outside more, get more sunshine. We can move and exercise. Uh, we could also, based on the research, I said there's something known as mood induction. So there are natural ways in which we can actually stimulate serotonin. And I actually want to conclude this video by saying that by having an understanding of neurotransmitters and an understanding of, say, like the endocrine system, we really can have better application to ways in which we can activate them naturally. There are ways to activate, say, dopamine unnaturally by taking, like, say, like coke or like meth. What I was learning about meth is that it's very interesting actually. Meth not only causes the flood of like causes the body to release more dopamine, but it also blocks the reuptake of dopamine. So you can imagine that. Like normally, like I said earlier, whenever neurotransmitters are activated, they send across another neuron and then they get reabsorbed. But meth causes an excess amount of dopamine to be released, and it blocks them from being reabsorbed. So this is why people like feel freaking blissed out for hours. So it's interesting to learn about these things and to learn about sort of the effects of them. And yeah, I want to conclude with by understanding, having a deeper understanding of the biological mechanisms that are related to mental conditions, say the dopamine, oxytocin, the serotonin, the endorphins, one of the four main compounds that are related to our overall happiness, and understanding how to activate them naturally, I think we can actually increase the quality of our lives by learning how to get into meditation, laughing more, and exercising, eating more whole foods, maybe having a regular sleeping pattern, drinking more water. And I will get into that in other videos. This is just kind of like a introduction, just kind of me riffing, talking about it. And yeah, with that being said, I'm deeply excited to explore more of this, and I hope you are too. And thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you want to see more content like this, if you want to see more psychology related videos, please leave your questions in the comment section below. If you want to support this channel, I will leave my Patreon, my Ko-Fi. And with that being said, thank you. Peace and love.